Just plucked a cucumber for dinner tonight at Growing with Nathan, but you're watching The Urban Gardener with Enoch.
Hey. Okay. Well, I guess there's some issues with our introduction there today. Everybody, welcome gardeners to the Let's Get Growing Garden Show here on the Urban Gardener channel. My name's Enoch, and I'm your host today for our show. And thanks to all of you for your patience today, as we've had to make just a little bit of an adjustment here in order to make sure that we're all lined up for our featured guests that we've got here on the show today. Really excited. We've got Ciscoe Morris joining with us here in just a little bit for a fun gardening conversation here. I've been a big fan of Ciscoe Morris for many years, and I'm really excited to have him here on the show today. And if you are joining with us here today, whether you're watching live with us or on our replay, be sure to click the like button there. Also, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And please share our channel and our show with all your garden friends and garden groups out there. Help make sure everybody knows that we're out here having some really great, fun gardening conversations each and every Saturday here at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And also, be sure to check out our website at letsgetgrowing.live, and you can find out all about our upcoming shows and the different things that we have going on the Urban Gardener channel. And yeah, and if you have any questions or comments or anything like that, please be sure to get into our comments section here for the live show and ask any questions that you might have, and especially some questions for our featured guest, Ciscoe Morris, today. And definitely ask all the questions you have. He's got a great amount of garden knowledge to share with us. And also, too, one way to support our show is to support our sponsor, Ivy Organics. And you can check out Ivy Organics at ivyorganics.com. They have a really great shop there and a couple of great products. A 3-in-1 plant guard, I think, is awesome. If you have any fruit trees, any trees growing in your gardens, something that you'll are OW10 in shop 30% off of all the different things that they've got there on Ivy Organics. And also, just wanted to catch up with all of you here about different things that we've got going on the Urban Gardener channel. I do have a new video coming out tomorrow, a new garden journal video, and a couple of other videos in the coming week as well too. Kind of catch up with some of the things that we've got growing on in our garden spaces here at home. Also, our micro farm that we have growing over at my friend Mike's place too. Everything's growing really well over there, and we're planting out new things every day. So I'm really excited about getting out into those spaces and sharing them all with you. It's been a busy week for me here on the Urban Gardener channel because I've been asked to do a couple of different presentations that we worked on this week. I filmed a presentation for the 7th annual Superfood Garden Summit, which is going to be July 17th through 21st. And they asked me to do a presentation on small space gardening. So we went out and filmed all of that this week and shared a bunch of my tips and tricks and different, focuses for growing in small spaces to make sure that you can optimize any sort of garden space that you might have to be able to grow all sorts of different things. And so hopefully be able to check that out. And I will remind everybody as we get closer to that summit about that presentation. Also, I joined with a friend of ours, Greg Peterson, who's also been a featured guest on our Let's Get Growing show. I did a kind of a little panel discussion with him again on small space gardening, answering a bunch of different questions for different viewers and listeners of his Urban Farm podcast. It's at the urbanfarm.org, and it's a really great fun podcast that he has there as well, talking to all sorts of different people, just as we do here. And it was really great to get invited on with him to be able to talk all sorts of things again about our specialty. What we focus on here on the Urban Gardener channel is more small space food gardening, and it was a really great time. And I will again to remind all of you when that comes up here, probably this next month, I think, is when that will air as a podcast on his Urban Farm podcast channel there. So lots of great things, lots of fun things going on for us here, besides all of the planting and gardening that we're doing here in our gardens. There's just, again, busy time of year. We've just passed our last frost date, so it's time for us to get all of our warm season summer crops planted out into all of our different spaces. So I've been kind of scurrying around all of the different places, trying to make sure I'm getting everything that I started from seed indoors, hardened off, ready, and planted out into our garden spaces, as well as a bunch of different direct seeding that we're doing as well with some of the different squash varieties that we're growing. And then we're also out planting and direct seeding some corn and squash and different things over in our micro farm as well too. So those will be some things that I'll update all of you on here on the channel coming up. But for now, let's take a look at what's going on. Where is it there? For our In the Garden segment. We'll check that. This week in the garden, as we're all out planting our plant starts and sowing our seeds. For most of us, the garden season is really underway. I wanted to take a few minutes to talk about plant spacing and cross-pollination, as there is a few things to understand when it comes to these subjects. Now, one of the things I've got to get finished up in my back patio garden space here today is these carrots in one of my deep elevated raised beds. And also I've got some radishes in one of my lower beds here that I've got to thin out. And now I want to make sure that each one of these plants has the appropriate amount of space so that they can grow fully. And what I do is I consult the back of my seed packet for each individual plant that I am spacing out. But the one thing you want to be aware of is most of your seed packets are going to describe to you about traditional row gardening when it comes to spacing out your plants. And in a small space garden like I've got in my back patio, or even in most gardens, we don't really need to follow along with the traditional row spacing that your seed packets talk about. So they'll talk about having so many inches between each plant, but then also it'll be a lot more space between each row. The only thing you really need to worry about when it comes to plant spacing for the individual plants that you're either thinning out or you're planting out transplants is where it tells you how far between each plant. So for carrots, for instance, you're looking at maybe just a few inches apart, and that goes for all directions. So I'll still do some rows when it comes to planting out the radishes and the carrots, but I'll make sure that those rows are just as far apart as what my ultimate plants are going to be between each other. So in all directions. So if it's 4 inches apart, you can do 4 inches between each plant and 4 inches between each row. And that's a good way to be able to make sure that you're getting in as many plants as you can with the space that you have to garden with. And again, I garden in this small space garden here in the back patio, and I'm looking to maximize every little bit of space that I can. So another thing to think about when it comes to plant spacing and making sure you're giving each of your plants enough room is to understand the different plants and the different varieties that you're growing, and knowing what those plants are going to be when they grow to full size. Now, that's where it's going to take a little bit of research or experience in understanding the full potential of each of the different plants that you want to grow in your garden. So highly encourage looking up online those different varieties and seeing about what size these plants are going to be, because that's really going to help you out when it comes to how far apart you want these different plants. Now, for example, I grow pepper plants. I grow a lot of different pepper plants, and they are going to grow probably about 3 to 4 feet tall. Plus, they're also going to get maybe about 2 to 3 feet wide. Now, that all depends on the different varieties of peppers, how that plant is actually going to grow, but I kind of go with that as a guideline. And then what I'm thinking about too is I want them to be close enough together to where they're barely just kind of crossing with each other, but not creating too much shade for the overall plants that I'm growing. So I use with peppers about 12 inches apart. And again, that's the same as what I was talking about with the carrots and the radishes. That's in all directions. So my rows are going to be 12 inches apart. My plants are going to be 12 inches apart as well. So that's really important to really understand the full size potential of what your plants are going to grow into. You don't want to have happen like I've seen with a few friends that I've gone over to help them out with their gardens, and seen that they've taken these small plant starts and they just put them in really close together, all sorts of different varieties of things, because they're just small plants and they're not thinking about the fact that those plants are going to grow into these full size plants later on down the road. So I've seen people put tomato plants with just a few inches over, putting a pepper plant with a few inches over, putting in a squash plant or something like that, where they don't really understand what that plant is going to grow into. So it's really kind of important as we're learning to garden to really dig into what each of these plants are going to do. You know, like I mentioned, squash plants are going to probably spread out if they're a viner, and they're going to grow on the ground level and really spread out. So that's going to take up some good amount of space between plants. Peppers, as I mentioned too, I do about 12 inches in all directions, and that's, you know, going to allow for all of these plants to kind of grow up together and kind of help support each other in the space that I'm growing them in. Tomato plants, you know, are going to grow really big. If it's an indeterminate, they're going to keep growing up. So whether you're allowing them to vine out on the ground, which is similar to squash, they're going to take up a good amount of space, or you're going to have them staked or trellised so that they can grow in an upright vertical fashion, and that's going to help with spacing when it comes to those sort of plants. But again, there's so many things that we can grow in our gardens, and we'll want to be doing the research in order to figure out what the full potential of those varieties that we're growing, so that we can help make sure that they've got enough space in our garden to be able to grow. Also, one of the other methods out there that you can use, that I do for most of my garden spaces here in my back patio and our alleyway, is utilizing the square space gardening method. The square space gardening method just basically breaks down your garden into individual 1 foot by 1 foot squares. And then you can look up again online just type in Squarespace gardening method and whatever variety of plant that you're growing, and you should be able to find some easy to use charts that'll show you just how many that you can plant into each one of those squares. And again, for small space gardening, or even most gardens in general, the square foot gardening method is a really great way to make sure that you're getting the full potential out of your garden and the different things that you're growing, and making sure that you're not leaving any space unused. So, all right, now let's talk about cross-pollination for a moment. I'd like to clear up a couple of misconceptions that I see in garden groups and garden forums each and every year. There's a lot of new gardeners out there who are looking for information, and sometimes I see this pop up every now and then when someone's asking about cross-pollinating peppers. Can I turn my sweet pepper into a hot pepper? Well, technically that is possible if you cross-pollinate those flowers with each other. But the big misconception here is that a lot of people believe that if you're planting these two different varieties of peppers near each other, that sweet pepper will turn hot this year. And that's not true. It's going to have to be grown out the next season from the seeds that you get in this year's fruit next year in order to find out what that cross actually done and what characteristics from those two different plants have combined together to form that new pepper fruit that you'll get the next season. Now, cross-pollination across all sorts of different plants can work somewhat similar as long as they are the same type of plants. And this is another misconception. You can't really take a pepper plant and a tomato plant and cross-pollinate those together to create some pepper tomato hybrid. It just doesn't work. They're two different species of plants, so those two different species are not going to be able to cross with each other. So there's a lot of different crossing and a lot of different efforts towards making new varieties of different things, especially when it comes to pepper growers and the pepper community. But when it comes down to it, you can't cross-pollinate those and get a result this year. And that's the same thing when it comes to squash or melons or any other sort of thing that you're trying to cross. Now, one thing too to think about as well, especially like when it comes to plants like tomatoes, they are a self-pollinating flower. So those flowers really, just by shaking the plant, will cause those flowers to pollinate, and you'd really have to take some effort to open up a flower and bring it to another plant's flower and really cross-pollinate those pollens with each other in order to create a new, say, tomato plant or tomato variety. And similar with squash or melons, they have flowers which are male and female. So you would take a male off of one flower, put it onto a female of another variety of that plant in order to try to create some sort of cross. But at that point, again, too, you're going to have to grow out your fruit this year and then take the seed from it and then plant it out and grow that plant out next year in order to find out how that cross actually worked out. Now, I hope that's some good information and helps clear up those sort of ideas for you when it comes to cross-pollination. And I hope we've helped you out a little bit with getting your plants spaced out to where you can get the most out of your garden spaces. My name's Enoch, and thanks for joining with me here in the garden, and I'll see you all next week. All right. Another little in the garden segment there for you, talking about utilizing the most out of your small spaces, or in general, most spaces. You can use that square foot gardening method. I really use that a lot. I do a lot of container gardening, so you can really kind of think of different containers as square feet, and some of the elevated raised beds that I use, I just break those down, and that really helps me out, making sure that I'm getting the most out of my garden that I can. When you only got so much space, it's really kind of important to do. So we'll be right back in just a moment here with our featured guest, Ciscoe Morris. Let's Get Growing is sponsored by IV Organic.
Hi, my name is Charles Malky, biologist and plant expert with IV Organics, where we grow cool plants and author Saving the World with the Home Garden. IV Organic 3-in-1 Plant Guard has 7 natural oils that protect your plants, not just from the summer heat as well as winter cold, but also protects your plants from damaging insects and rodents. The oils in the product include castor, cinnamon, clove, garlic, peppermint, rosemary, and spearmint. These oils are natural insect and rodent repellent oils, which are encapsulated by the base powder, offering your plants months of protection at a time. 1 application per year will suffice for protection against damaging summer sunburn and winter sun scald, but if the target is pests, application as much as 2 to 3 times a year may be necessary.
All right. This week's featured guest on our Let's Get Growing program is Ciscoe Morris. Ciscoe is a well-known personality in the Pacific Northwest. He has been featured regularly on King 5 New Day Northwest, King 5 News, King 5 Evening, and he wrote a newspaper column for the Seattle Post-Intelligencer for a long time, and he also is the author of the books Ooh La La and Ask Ciscoe. And in the Pacific Northwest, he gives over 50 garden presentations a year. Ciscoe can often be found working in his Northwest garden, and also does lots of different travel and leads garden tours in different countries all over the world. And let's welcome Ciscoe Morris to our program. Hello, Ciscoe. How's it going today?
Oh la la! Hey, it's going great. How you doing?
Doing awesome. Awesome. Really great to have you on the show with us this week. So how's everything been going there for you in your garden this year?
Oh, it's been going great. It feels like I'm miles behind in my garden just because I've been so busy. But that's the biggest dilemma for any gardener, just trying to keep up with it. But with all this heat, it seems like I'm spending more time watering than anything else. But that's
Yeah.
kind of the way it goes. And some of the worst weeds are just having a heyday. That morning glory is driving me nuts.
Yes, I'm telling you, weeding is the bane of every gardener's existence for sure. But yeah, and I've got them all over the place. I'm trying not to let them get to me too much, but man, I don't want to. I've got some that I haven't gotten to yet, and I can already tell that they're starting to form flowers, and so I'm really worried. I'm like, I got to get out there and I got to get to these things before they start spreading all over the place even more.
Yeah, you betcha. That's the exact same feeling I have. But I just had a really great contorted filbert. It's red majestic. And when I got it, the tag said resistant to the filbert blight. Well, it wasn't. So
Oh,
I've had that for a lot of years. It was a big, beautiful tree. I just had to dig that out, and but I got it out. A feeling of vengeance. And then the good thing is now I got that open space for something new and exciting. So I always love that. So
yes, that's actually, I most gardeners, we just hate to see certain things go. You really kind of, you put the time and effort into growing something into your garden space, and then all of a sudden something happens to it. I've got a few plants this year that are just, kaput. They're not gonna, they're not doing anything this year. But moving and removing those plants and opening up that space to something new is kind of a whole new kind of reward to the whole having to let that other plant go, right?
Oh yeah. My favorite place on earth is the nursery.
Oh
I'm
yes.
I'm always looking for something new and unusual. I want plants so when people come over, they go, "What in the world is that?" So half the fun's just going to be figuring out what to put there. And I'll be hunting around. I'll be going to some of the rare plant sources, and I'll find something really cool for there before I'm done.
Yeah, yeah, I love the nursery too. And it is just amazing how many different varieties of plants and different things there are. Just when you think you've got it figured out, there's all sorts of other varieties that, I just can't believe most things. But there's nothing like taking a tour around the nursery, even if there's, even just to look at things that you might not even be able to put into your garden, but just to kind of think about all the different possibilities.
It's so funny. I walk in the nursery, and people people that work there run up and go, "I got something to show you." They know that if there's something cool, I'm gonna buy it. I may not know where the heck I'm gonna put it, but I'm gonna buy it.
I know, huh? There's just some you just can't resist, huh?
Oh, geez, and my goal in life is to have one of every kind of plant on earth in my garden before I die. I think I'm three away now.
Only three. Awesome. That's great. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about some of your history. Cisco, you've been around in the Pacific Northwest gardening and sharing your passion for growing things for many, many years. Um, let's dig even further back. When did you get your first garden experience?
Well, I gardened with my grandma and my mom when I was a
Yeah.
kid, and I learned a lot from them. And then one day, the church down the street, I didn't even go to this church, started advertising. They were sticking signs on telephone poles and things. They were looking for an assistant gardener. And so I was 10 years old,
Oh,
and
yeah.
I got the name Ciscoe, because I loved the Cisco Kid TV show.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I even wore this cool sombrero. So I told my mom and grandpa, I'm going to go get that job down there. And they were, "Oh, that's so cute, Cisco. Yeah, you go get that job." Nobody thought, they're going to give a 10-year-old kid the job. Well, the sixth time I went and harassed this poor priest in charge of hiring. It's the first time I ever heard a priest swear. He just went, "All right, you little blankety blank, you got the job. Don't ever come in this office again." And so
Yeah.
the guy that Joe was sort of the caretaker for the church. He was the gardener. He did everything, and I had to buff the floors and things. The buffer was twice the size of me. It would beat me against the wall instead of go back and forth. But Joe taught me all kinds of gardening, and something happened to him in World War II. And so, because of whatever happened, he would not touch a poison for anything, no matter what. And so, he taught me all these really great ways to garden without using poisons and really environmentally kind of working with nature instead of against it. So, that job at that church was the best thing that ever happened to me. And plus I was quite popular by the candy machine in the YMCA because I got $1.25 an hour.
Oh, yes. That's great. Persistence pays off sometimes, right?
Oh yeah, it really does. And and I learned things like how to prune hydrangeas from old Joe, and we had a big vegetable garden, and I grew big pumpkins and all kinds of great veggies. So yeah, it was a pretty cool job. I really learned a lot. Our weed control. Uh, so old Joe would he'd have a big teapot, and he'd heat the water up till it was boiling, pour it in his tea. I'd have a big glove on. He'd hand it to me. I'd run out and pour it on the weeds in the cracks of the sidewalks.
Oh,
It smelled like steamed veggies, and it worked like a charm. You had to move fast, though. It had to be really hot to work. But so that's one of the tricks I learned from Joe. Another really cool one was we had those flea beetles. And flea beetles, for anybody that's ever had them, you know them. They're little black beetles, but they got really powerful back legs, just like a flea. And so when you walk up to them, they just go and jump off the plant that they're on. And they chew the tweedle out little holes in potatoes and cucumbers, all kinds of things. And so they were quite a problem at the church in his big veggie garden. But Joe had the technique down. He would actually, now you could use a different substance like, tanglefoot. But in those days, he would paint gear oil on a board and leave spots for my hands. And I'd come out there and sneak up on the plant really quiet. And at the last second, I'd go, boo! And I loved the looks on their beady little eyes when they got stuck to the oil on the board, And if I did that every morning for about 2 weeks, those flea beetles were gone. Usually a week is all it took to nail them, Now I do a different method where I stick tanglefoot inside like a 5-gallon bucket, and I just stick it over the plant, and they go, and they're stuck so fast. Works like a charm,
That's a great fun method, especially for a young kid too, huh?
Oh, I loved it.
Yeah. I've seen similar things where you take like for a lot of the soil bugs, especially like indoor plants, and you can get a lot of them from nurseries, but using like little yellow cards and putting Vaseline on them. So that you just put it in there, and those bugs just go right to that yellow and stick right to those cards. I've seen that worked really well.
Yeah,
but I really like the idea. You talked about, and that you also learned that really early on too, is about utilizing organic methods to taking care of things in your garden, because there isn't anything worse than and I don't know what it was really like back when you were first starting to learn about gardening and all of that, but you go into your big box stores or most garden centers, and you get into these aisles just full of this poison.
Oh, yeah.
Just big old bottles, all colorful and bright and appealing to new gardeners and all of that too. And it's just I really wish that there was just a little bit more people like yourself and that out there pushing back against some of that, and teaching and showing people how to take care of their gardens organically without all of that crazy chemicals.
Well, I worked on the commercial side of gardening. I went to horticulture school back in the early 70s. And so after I graduated out of there, I actually was the head pruner for a company for many years. But when we didn't have a pruning job, or they needed me to do some other kind of maintenance, I got sent with those crews, and it was squirt first, ask questions later,
Yes.
And some of the stuff we used, it's scary to look back at paraquat and, diazinon and just, blasting away with the stuff. So, I'll tell you, I never liked that. I never liked that idea of doing that. And, now there's still more stuff out there that I'd never touch in a million
Yeah.
years. I think weed and feed is one of the worst. That National
Yeah.
Institute of Cancer's done 2 studies that found lymphoma linked to using that lymphoma in dogs, So
Wow.
I got 2 puppies. I love the wheel out of my puppies,
I
So I'm
know.
not going to use that.
And I got
Huh?
I've got cats around my garden. So I'm a cat guy, you're a dog guy. Some people, as crazy it is, are actually children people.
Oh, yeah.
They
Children,
love
my
their
God,
children, right? And you're thinking
if you
about your
use weed
big
and feed and let
lawns
your kids out there,
rolling around. Oh my
yeah.
gosh.
Even
Yeah,
at Seattle U, I directed the grounds care at Seattle University for 24 years. And, the administration wanted me to use weed and feed. They couldn't stand dandelions in the lawns, and there's a lot of lawns on a big college
yeah.
campus. And I just wouldn't do it. I saw those young people out there sunbathing on
Yeah.
the grass and playing frisbee in bare feet, and I just wouldn't do it. And but an old time gardener called my radio show and said, "Haven't you ever heard about using vinegar to kill
Yeah.
weeds?" And I'm like, "Vinegar?" I had no idea. We'd
Yeah.
use straight white vinegar from the grocery store. We had backpack sprayers full of vinegar, a long wand, and I duct tape a funnel on the end. We'd stick it down over the dandelion. You
Yeah.
remember in Over the Rainbow when the Wicked Witch got water squirted on her
Yeah.
and she's going, "I'm melting." That's
Yes.
what the weeds yell when you squirt with
I
vinegar.
mean, if you listen closely, you can hear it, right?
Yeah, I'll tell you, it had to be a hot, sunny day. But boy, when
Oh
we'd
yeah.
get out and do that weed killing, it worked so good. It would kill a little grass. We'd have to, drop some seed. We'd punch holes so the seed were down in the soil, not laying on thatch. There's one problem with using vinegar for a weed killer, though. And that is if you got a hot date planned for that night, it better be someone that likes pickles, because, oh la la, you're going to smell like the world's greatest pickler for 3 days.
For sure, huh? Definitely. That's great stuff. Yeah, and vinegar, that's one of the things I use a lot of too. And I was actually just talking to a friend of mine who's trying to take care of all these weeds growing up out of he's kind of got a gravel driveway,
Oh, yeah.
and he was telling me, like, he's out there plucking and pulling these, and his neighbors are coming around, and everybody he talks to always suggests using Roundup, using
Yeah.
this glyphosates and all of that. And I was like, don't ever do that. Just don't do that. Just get yourself some vinegar and get out there and just spray the tweedle out of them, right?
Yeah. Spray the tweedle out of it. And boy, the hotter it is out, the better it works.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting. I'm not exactly certain why that is, but boy, have I noticed that on a 90-degree day, that weed's dead in 2.5 hours. Unbelievable.
Probably just
Yeah.
dehydrates the plant so much that it just can't get back to normal with all the heat. But yeah, definitely. And again, that's just, one of the things I just, I think I really enjoy about some of the things that I've learned from you over the years. In fact, that's one thing I haven't mentioned yet is I've been listening and following you since somewhere in the 90s. I remember is when I first started
Wow.
hearing you on the weekend radio and seeing you on the television there in the Seattle area. I lived there for many, many years. And again, just one of the things, I mean, I think when it comes to anybody, if you talk to anybody in the Pacific Northwest, is that Ciscoe Morris is a regional treasure and just an amazing personality. And, when it comes to your passion for gardening, that just really conveys, I mean, you can't walk away from listening to you talk about your plants and gardens without wanting to give it a shot yourself. So that's kind of how I really got pushed into growing and doing things myself as well, listening to a lot of the advice you give.
People are often surprised to hear who the host of my very first TV show was. Jeff Probst from
Oh.
Survivor.
Yeah.
He lived in Everett, Washington, and he worked at Boeing, but he was taking acting lessons, and his dad told him, there's no way you're quitting this great job at Boeing to do this hokey garnish show. Look what I did for his career.
I know. You launched him right up.
Yeah, he was a great guy. Really liked him a lot. I haven't seen him for a long time, but he's a great guy.
Yeah. So how did that? I mean, so again, you mentioned actually just a moment ago that you were a longtime caretaker of the Seattle University Gardens and Lands. So is that where you started your career in radio and television?
Well, nobody's sure exactly how long I was on the radio because I didn't get paid at first. Because I took over after an extension agent retired, and it was really funny because a couple of times he hurt his back one time, and I went in and took the show. And I had to say, I don't know, so many times. I didn't know the answer to some of these questions. So when he quit, he recommended me to take his place on Cairo Radio. And I was a master gardener. I became a master gardener, I think, in 1980 or 81. And so all my master gardener buddies are like, why did he pick you to do the radio? What's so special about you, So I was terrified of making a mistake. And I'll never forget on the 8th show. So, you talk into a microphone, you listen through your earphones, and all you know is who's calling. That was all on the computer I knew. And you talked into the mic, and and you hit the button of the phone line. So I hit the button. I go, Mary from Renton, how are you? She goes, I want to wring your neck. I said, what did I do wrong? I was like, oh, no, I wanted to go, oh, I lost her, but I did. I said, what did I do wrong? And she said, you told me to get wood chips to use as mulch in my garden. I said, you don't like wood chips? I think they're the best mulch you can get for so many reasons. And she goes, no, that's not the problem. She told me if you saw a guy working, or a man or a woman cutting down a tree and sticking the big branches through the grinder, she said, tell him to drop them at my house. She said her husband was in taking a nap. He had a big business meeting in 2 hours. She came back 4 hours later, and here is this 20-yard pile of wood chips in the middle of her driveway, and her husband in her car are on the other side going, where the heck did this come from? And but yeah, so I got my first radio show because I took the job of the extension agent. And since he didn't get paid, because that was part of his job, I didn't get paid. Finally, I did, but it took a while. My dad was always going, you should tell him to pay you, I said, I'll get paid someday, don't worry. And so that's kind of taken over for George. George Pinu was part of it. And then George also had a TV show on Cairo TV, because Cairo TV and radio were together a long time. And when he decided to retire doing that, he recommended me for that. And it's really funny because the first day I had to do it. This is live TV. I'd never been on live TV. I was terrified. So I know how gathered up a bunch of bugs that I was going to show. I think I had some ground beetles I was going to show, and they're super fast running. So nobody even said hi to me. I'm in the back getting ready to go on. Nobody's telling me what to do, how to get ready. And they go, you're on. I go out there. First thing that happens, my bugs escape. The anchor woman I'm working with starts screaming and running around the set. It ended up so funny. They loved it in the long run, and I ended up doing that for years and years. So every Thursday, I'd bring something in to show on live TV, and so just things kept building that way. And then my great buddy Megan Black, that anybody that saw any of my old TV shows, she's just wonderful. She's the spokesperson for the Bellevue Police Department now. I go out to breakfast. She's got like 4 radios and all this stuff. She might have to run out. But I met her at Cairo. She was the weather woman at Cairo TV. Then she went to King. And one day, I wasn't doing Cairo TV anymore. She calls me up and said, hey, I'd like to come over and do a thing on how to protect your plants from cold. So she came over and we did a thing, and it ended up hilarious. And she called me up from King and said, hey, the big bosses want you to come down here, you know. So I said, sure, I'll do that. And I went in the room with them, and they go, what do you think we want you to do? And I said, probably be on the new news giving garden tips. And they go, nope. They called Megan and they go, we want you two to do a show together. She almost fainted. She was like, what? I don't know anything about gardening, you know. She was really freaked out, but we ended up just inseparable buddies and had so much fun doing the show together. Just we would end up laughing so hard. There'd be huge crowds around us everywhere we went. So yeah, I was just lucky as heck to get her for a partner. It's just terrific.
Yeah, all of those television spots are so, I mean, again, another thing, a testament of your just wittiness and passion for gardening and growing things. It just really, I love watching those. In fact, if you haven't, I'll tell everybody who's viewing now or listening right now, if you haven't seen anything that Ciscoe's done, get on YouTube and check out some of his television spots and things that he's done. It's just some really great stuff. I really enjoy it. And one of the other things too that I've been trying to get out and do more often, especially now that our pandemic is over, is getting out to that Northwest Flower and Garden Show that each year. I mean, I went to a couple of years and seen a couple of presentations, and finally got back to it this year and saw you again this year. And I tell you, you put on a really great garden talk. I think pretty much got standing room only in that big convention center room.
Well,
and you know, people, it's really funny. I'll just say this. I'll tell people, it's like, you know, you think you're going to go see a garden talk and you end up at a stand-up comedy show with the whole audience. I can't believe the audience just rolling in the aisles and laughing. You're just so good. It's just crazy.
I've been so lucky. You know, I'm one of only 2 people that has spoken at every Northwest Flower and Garden Show since it started, which I'm really honored to be. And so I can never travel when that show's going because I gotta be there, you know. But yeah, it is really funny, and I've had so much fun giving talks there. And you know, also I've been doing that Container Wars over the last few years. And, you know, so you have a contest who could do the best containers, and they give you the plants and you know, so Richie Steffen, the guy from Great Plant Picks, and I were usually challenging. This year it was Nita Joe Roundtree, and we both just cheated like mad. I'd go all over to the vendors going, let me borrow this plant, you know, and I'd hide it underneath and bring it out. But the best one I did that made me the big winner, his container was twice as good as mine was. But I had gone around to all the vendors, and I found the ugliest, most disgusting plastic gnome that this vendor had for sale. So at the very last second, I stuck it in his container and I won.
Oh, yes.
It was so funny. Oh my gosh.
I love it. I love those. The container wars are really great, really awesome. I watched you do one where you're running over, grabbing some from the other person, and I'm going to use this one. And
This year I brought this big rubber chewy pig. It's this big pig. It's a chewy thing for dogs, but my dogs were terrified of it because it goes really loud.
Oh gosh.
So I brought it in, and every time my opponent tried to talk, I'd be.
You'll do anything for a win, won't you?
You gotta win. That's number one.
That's right. Gotta be number one. Gotta win. But yeah, it's so great. And yeah, I just love that show. It's a really great kickoff to the whole gardening season and everything, and getting a chance to see so many different people who are doing all sorts of different things in the gardening world, and lots of different authors and presenters and just so many things. Oh, and those showcases that they have. Isn't that some of the most amazing things that you see? Oh, I can't believe how
the
they
show
put those
gardens
together.
And they have to do it in 2 nights, I think.
Yeah.
They have to put them together so fast. And I've been down there when they're doing it. You got to watch where you stand. There are forklifts whipping by.
Yeah, huge
big,
cranes.
all kinds of huge equipment, and noisy as heck. And it's pretty amazing, but we're so lucky to have it. It's the second biggest flower and garden show in the country now.
Yeah.
So it's pretty cool. I think, what is it? Philadelphia is the only bigger one. But I've talked to people. I've never been to the Philadelphia show. I've talked to people. They say ours is better.
Oh,
so of course it is.
Absolutely. I've been there. I know. Well, I haven't been to the Philadelphia one either, but I know that the Seattle Garden Show is just a really great experience. I also, one of 2 shows I try to make sure I go to every year, barring the break that we had with the pandemic and everything, is also really love the National Heirloom Exposition that they have down in California as well too. That's just another really great gardening, and especially for those of us who really center a lot of our gardening in growing food. So it's one of those really great festivals too. So to me, my top 2, Seattle's Flower and Garden Show and the National Heirloom Exposition, those are really great shows that you've got to go check out and go see, because you get to see so many really awesome people like Ciscoe and other great gardeners. Someone we got coming on the show here in a few weeks as well too. I met up at the Northwest Flower and Garden Show, Christy Wilhelmi. She wrote a book called Garden Variety, which I think is a really great book. It's actually a fiction book on that kind of centers around gardening and community gardening.
Wow, that sounds fun. I'll have to look that up.
You've got to check it out. Really great book, a really great read, and just kind of a different way of being able, because it's full of like little tips and things as well too about taking care of things in a garden and everything, but it's all centered around a fictional story of this community garden down in the Los Angeles area. I think it's really great. So I'm really excited about getting to interview her and talk to her about her book. Now, I do have one of your books here. This one I've had around for quite a while here, Ask Ciscoe, where you get to ask or you answer a bunch of different really cool questions that people have asked you over the years. And also you have the book Ooh La La as well too, right? That you just wrote back in 2020.
So Ask Ciscoe actually was the #1 selling garden book in the United States for a while, which was so exciting for me. And my new book, Oh La La, they wanted me to write the same book over again with new questions, but I didn't want to do it. So we negotiated. They finally let me write a very unusual gardening book. It's short stories. They're true stories from my gardening career, and they're supposed to be super funny. All I could tell you is I laughed my head off when I wrote it. And if you suffer from insomnia, 10 minutes at bedtime takes care of everything. So, they're short stories about gardening. They're real fun. So Yeah, it came out right when the pandemic started, and I had 30 book signings have to cancel. Oh, that was
Oh,
tough. But you know what?
yeah,
That's life in the big kitty. You go with what you got, you know.
that's right. That's right. Yeah, I mean, that was kind of a big interrupter for all of us who really like to
Oh,
enjoy and get out and do things and all of that. But one big benefit of that, I think, too, and I've had a couple of discussions with people too, is that, that kind of, as people were more at home and doing things and kind of centered around their house and all of that, I think a lot of people ended up walking away from the pandemic with a new appreciation for gardening and growing things and being able to get outdoors too. So I think
you do
if there was
too.
any sort of benefit out of all of that, was probably creating more gardeners and spreading
It's
that
so
passion for
funny.
growing.
So I spent a lot of time in my garden. My garden never looked better than during the pandemic, you know.
Yeah.
But everybody in this neighborhood knows who I am and knows my garden. You know, it's a pretty cool garden. So
Yeah.
half the world was walking by while I was doing. I'd be doing 20-minute seminars on the garden. People just stood far apart. And
Yeah.
so it kept me really active and it made fun for them. And just so the pandemic for me was actually a heck of a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
I have a very similar situation for me. My gardens and where I grow outside is really kind of open to everybody. I don't really have like closed fencing that closes off everything. And I've got these alleyways that people walk down through all the time. And I had a very similar situation going for me when it was the pandemic time. Was a lot of people, because again, people are out walking and they're out doing things because there isn't much to do, and so I had a lot of people cruising through our garden spaces and just asking all sorts of questions and getting to do the same thing, kind of do these little garden seminars with everybody.
it's so fun talking gardening. You know, that's
Oh,
dogs
yeah,
and gardening and cats. I've had a lot of
yeah.
cats too. Cats always rule the roost. That's all I
Yeah.
know. They not only boss the dogs around, they boss us around. I actually read that if they were twice as big as our house cats are now, they'd eat us. So
Yeah. I'll tell you, that's one of the things also is I was gonna say is that you see somebody out gardening and they've got a really cool big garden in their house. You got to watch out when you stop them and ask them a question because you'll be standing there for a while.
yeah, you will.
You get
There's
one
no
of us,
doubt about
you get
that.
one of us gardeners getting us a chance to talk about the things that we're growing. We're gonna hold your ears for a while.
You hit that on the head.
So be careful when you're passing by a really nice gardener and that guy's outside. Absolutely. So it's one of the things that on my channel, the Urban Gardener channel, is we talk a lot about growing our own food and food gardening. And I know you do a lot of specialized gardening when it comes to even landscape and all that sort of stuff. But I know you grow some food as well too in your gardens. Is there any
Oh
sort
yeah.
of well, I think I know the answer to this too, but any sort of favorites that you have
Well,
that you grow in your garden? Because I know
I'm
you have a lot of
famous.
favorites.
I'm definitely famous for loving Brussels sprouts. And some
Yes.
of that is because every couple I meet, one person loves them and one hates them. My
Mhm.
wife calls my Brussels sprouts my little boogers, so she's not fond of them. They're hard to grow, by the way. They
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 are.
like sun, but they don't like heat. They're tricky.
Yeah.
And you got to get the right varieties. If you don't, they're not just never going to ripen up. And, even though you want them to get hit by a freeze, they got to get big enough before the end of the season or you're out of
Mhm.
luck. But I right now out in my garden, I got this from the famous gardener buddy of mine named Dan Hinckley. He gave me some wild arugula, and I don't know where he got this stuff. And it is the strongest arugula I've ever had, and I love arugula so much. And it just it's like a ground cover in my whole veggie garden. It kind of gives weed control, you know. It
Oh
grows
yeah.
so fast. And even as fast as I can eat it, I'm giving it to everybody, you know, and you give one little piece to somebody and it grows. So,
Yeah.
so I'm really into that. And of course, I always grow tomatoes. Oh my God.
Yeah.
And stew peas is probably
Yeah.
my favorite tomato. I just love it. It's so doggone good tasting. But, and sun gold. It wins
Oh
every
yeah.
blind taste test I do, never
Yeah.
fails. And I used to have straight sideburns till I bit into a sun gold tomato on a hot sunny day right off the vine. My sideburns have been curly ever since. It's nothing you could do about it. Oh, so good. So I'm always trying all kinds of new types of tomatoes. I like Berkeley tie-dye a lot.
Hmm.
And I find at my house, I always grow a lot of cherry tomatoes because you
Yeah.
never know if it's a lousy summer, I might not get those heirlooms to ever ripen up, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I love some of the big old heirlooms, but I've been disappointed and made too much chutney at the end of
Yeah.
the season. So, but
Yeah. That was
I'm
kind of a
and
challenge for me this last year was the tomatoes. And for me, I live down in Southern Oregon, and we've just been getting some, I mean, amazingly hot summers. And tomatoes as well as peppers, those sort of things love the sun. They're sun-loving plants, but they only like it to a certain amount. You get up into those high 90s and early hundreds, which we saw really persistently a lot this last year. Those tomato plants are just not, the flowers are falling off before they even get to, form any fruits and everything. So I had very limited growth. I did have a couple of varieties. I think one was called a Big Red Chief, and then I also had a purple variety too, a darker variety that did all right throughout the summertime. But for the most part, most of those, those heirlooms and those bigger tomatoes just weren't making it, and ended up having again to rely on all those cherry tomatoes I was growing.
yeah, those guys come through. It
Yeah.
seems like no matter what, you always end up getting a ton of those. I grew last year for the first time. I've read about it, but I don't know, I never bought the seeds to try it. It was called Glacier, and they're good sized cherry tomatoes. I was eating cherry tomatoes on July 4th out of my garden last year.
Oh
I
wow.
couldn't believe it. It's a really tough tomato, can take the cold. Got a
Yeah.
little roasted in some of those hot days too. You know, people don't know that peppers and tomatoes can get sunburned.
Yeah.
And you're right,
Yeah.
the flowers fall off. It's terrible.
Yeah, once it gets too hot, that's the thing. Again, most people think of those plants as big sun-loving plants. You want to have them out in the direct sun for most of your day, but it gets so hot, it gets too hot for them as well at times.
Yeah.
And
Another problem I've been noticing, and I've been getting a lot of emails from people about it, is zucchini. So
yeah,
zucchini grow about 4 inches, the fruit, and then they
yeah.
rot. And people are like,
Oh,
what's going on? And it's no bees. We don't have bees going from the male flower to the female flower. You
oh
remember
yeah.
in the old days, you'd be in the house, somebody'd ring the doorbell, you'd go out, open the door, no one's there. You'd look to the side, and there are 6 4-foot long zucchinis laying on your porch. That's a drive-by zucchini, Ian, you know.
I've done that. I've done that.
Have you done that? I can
I've
tell.
done that.
You look so mischievous sometimes.
I've actually done that. Whether it's zucchini or other extras in my garden, some of my neighbors will find them right out in their front porches. But another thing I think is really funny about like zucchini and those sort of things is, like you said, you'll see them at like 4 inches, and then you go, okay, well, I'll just go and I'll harvest that tomorrow. You wait till tomorrow, and then you pull out this big old, it's like this big
Oh,
now.
they grow so fast.
It's
Oh my
amazing.
gosh. Yeah, you end up making zucchini cake, zucchini bread. It's like, yeah, and so I
Run out
hand
of things to
pollinate
make
them
with
now.
zucchini for sure.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah, and that was the
yeah,
thing I was
I've
going to
got
recommend too. If you're not seeing the pollination working, or if your plants are just, not making it, that's the best way to do it, especially with squash and those sort of plants like that have both the male and the female flowers. It's
yeah,
just to, get down there and mate them together yourself, and kind of ensure that you're going to get something out of it
yeah. You
there.
could tell the female flower has that little zucchini under it. The
Mm,
male doesn't. And I find a male
mm,
can pollinate 5 females they got enough pollen on them to do that. And then,
yeah.
the other trick I do, I plant lavender around my veggie garden and in my veggie garden.
Yes.
Boy, does that bring in the bees. So good
Oh,
thing to
yes.
do.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Anything like that. I also have some oregano that I grow kind of like, um, it's kind of in between a couple of different garden beds that I have, but it's really close to my back patio garden. And that's when you let that get up and go to flower as well, like the lavender, the bees just go
Oh,
crazy over
yeah.
it.
They love
But
that stuff.
but then I'm encouraging them to get out into my patio there, and also check out all the other flowers as well too. But yeah, the
Yeah.
bees are important, aren't they?
Oh, boy. Yeah, they're so important. And, I raised mason bees for years, but then they got that mite problem so bad. You'd
Yeah.
see a mason bee come out, and it was so covered with mites it would land on the ground. It just broke my heart. They couldn't even fly. They were too heavy and bit up by the mites. And you could. So I started self cleaning them a lot. Using
Yeah.
bleach. I just got tired of it and stopped doing it. And I'm still getting pretty good fruit, but not as good as I used to with the mason bees. Now you can rent them. There's people that rent
Renting
them
them, huh?
out, and then you take them back. They do all the cleaning and everything. So I think I'm going to try that next year.
Renting out your bees.
Yeah, you could actually rent mason bees and then take them back to the guy. He cleans them. It's a great deal.
Well, I have to look into that. That looks like an interesting thing to do. I've always wanted to just get my own beehives. I've just been fascinated with bees. I would love to have my own beehive and collect my own honey and all of that too. That's one of those things down the road. Hopefully, I'll get an
Yeah,
opportunity to do.
yeah, I think
Yeah,
that would be fun too. I've done like TV shows with bee growers and everything. There was a really
yeah.
cool restaurant. I can't remember downtown. They had beehives up on the roof, and they
Oh
had
wow.
vegetable gardens up there, and it was really cool. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think raising bees would be a lot of fun. There's just not enough time to do everything there is to do out in the garden.
That is my biggest limitation, right? Especially when you grow so many things and do so many different projects, it's hard to kind of keep all that together and everything. All right, let's see. I wanted to dig into, I was looking at the back of your Ask Cisco book here, and I thought you had a great question here. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions of you here. Can I
Sure.
grow an apple tree in a pot on the deck of my condo? Now that kind of goes for a
Not
lot of
very
reasons.
easy. You couldn't. You
No.
could, one of these. What do they call those real narrow? I can't think of what they call them. Real narrow apple trees that don't really branch out, and
Yeah.
they're pyramidal, and they form fruit on that. I think in a big enough pot, you could do that pretty easy. But
Yeah.
even a dwarf apple tree would be pretty tough to grow in a pot. It would get root bound so fast.
Yeah. So you don't. So in containers in general, though, you don't think you're getting the best out of would it be just generally apple trees or any other varieties or fruit trees in general?
Oh, I grow some of these new dwarf figs, Little
Yeah.
Miss Figgy, and
Yeah.
what's the other one? Little Miss Ruby, I think. And so I'm growing one of those, and that's doing really good in a pot. So because it's slow enough growing. Now, how long it'll stay happy in that pot? Because it's only the size of a whiskey barrel. because I mean, how much room do you got for? You can't put them in a a hot tub or something unless you got a lot of room. So, but those figs do real well, and you can move them into the sunniest spot you got, which is what they want.
Yeah.
So I'd say that I've grown the dwarf peaches and nectarines in pots. They did great. The problem with the dwarf peaches and nectarines, they're all susceptible to that doggone peach leaf curl. And so you got to remember to spray in the middle of winter, which is so hard to remember to do. So I always would end up getting peach leaf curl. They were the cutest little plants, and the peaches and nectarines were delicious. But if you didn't spray, they just got massacred by so I got rid of those after a while too, but I had them for a long time.
Yeah.
But generally, I can't imagine too many fruit trees. But the exciting thing right now is all these new fruiting shrubs that they are hybrid just to grow in pots. So I just planted, I just showed it on TV. I don't think it's shown yet. Baby cakes. So baby cakes is a blackberry.
Oh, wow.
Never gets more than 4 foot by 4 foot. Doesn't grow like a blackberry out in the wilds. It grows as a round bush.
Oh, wow.
And all you do is prune off anything that dies, because after they bloom, pretty soon that dies. You prune that off and never prune it down or anything. And now this is the first year I'm growing it, but it's already filled with the fruit's already done. I mean, the flowers and fruit's already starting to form on this thing.
Oh, wow. That is pretty early, too, for a blackberry.
Oh, that's early. It's supposed to fruit twice a year. So we'll see if it does. But I'm all in a tizzy over that. And of course, I've grown some of those dwarf raspberries in there. And I've got blueberries out there in pots all over the place, and they're just great. And like blueberries, you're really best off if you do 2 different varieties, because then they cross and you get bigger, better berries.
Yeah.
So
definitely. I've got big, I got several blueberry plants in these big storage containers that I have to give them nice big room to do that. And then also one of the keys for blueberries is making sure you're using some acidic soil and fertilization as well. Get something that's good for acidic plants to help with that.
I use organic roadie food for my and oh man, they just love it. I get so many berries, or should I say the birds get so many berries. Have you ever found
cover them up a little bit?
Trying to cover them once the berries are on there, you knock more berries off than the birds can eat. So I think if I were going to do a real blueberry patch, I would. Now I have done what I do is I put in bamboo stakes and I put the bird netting over those. And that way you don't knock off all the doggone berries. But I would build a permanent structure over blueberries with screening that you could just walk in there and harvest, and the birds would go nuts. You'd get attacked by the robins when you walked out of there. It's hard to cover blueberries, I find, but I get enough of them. I'm happy. And it's true that blueberries are really good for night sight. In World War II, the Spitfire pilots had to eat a great big bowl of blueberries every day for their night sight. So
wow. Yeah, I have read that blueberries are like one of the #1 superfoods for sure.
Oh, they're so good for you. That's why I'm so buff and good looking. It's from eating those so often.
And I'm really intrigued though by that blackberry like you're talking about. I'm gonna have to find out. What was the name of that blackberry again?
Baby cakes.
Baby cakes.
Baby cakes. And it looks like it's starting to already form fruit. It's like, and awesome. It's not the prettiest plant you've ever seen, like all blackberries. But they say that they ripen up not all at once. So you got red ones, black ones, So
in all different stages. But
yeah,
for us though, who live in the Pacific Northwest, a lot of people out there, seek out and look for blackberry plants and all of that. But for us, they're wild everywhere, and they get, they're very invasive, and they can, they can
people
be,
hate them.
they can be over. It's for such a delicious berry. Yeah, they could be such a nuisance for a lot of people. So I'm really intrigued with the idea that they can be contained into a container. That's just really
Yeah, and they're thornless too, which is really
thornless as
nice.
well. Oh wow,
Yep,
even better.
but I should tell a little story here about how I
Yes.
got rid of blackberries at SU, because
Oh
at
yeah.
Seattle University, we owned vacant lots that the
Yeah.
school had bought at some point, and I had to walk by this vacant lot that no one knew who owned to get to this VA guidance center that we did own, and I would do the gardening there. One day the guy came out and he had a big rip in his pants, and he went, those blackberries next door, because they were on both sides of the sidewalk, 20 feet high. Somebody had made a tunnel that you could walk through. So the guy
Yeah.
came out and said, can you do something about those blackberries over there? And I said, this is not my problem. Somebody else owns that lot. I said, I'll find out who owns the lot. I'll squeal on them to the city, and the city will make them come clean it up. So I figured out the address. I called the city. I told them this guy's not, whoever owns this is not taking care of this lot. It's just full of blackberries. 2 days later, I get called into the office. My boss goes, someone just squealed on us for a vacant lot we own. You got to clean it up. I'm like, oh, la, la. So, so at first, we use no herbicides at Seattle U. We use some we use some, what do you call it, vinegar, but, we weren't going to use enough vinegar to do this whole huge lot. So I got lead chaps, and we cut it down with a weed eater with a blade. It was scary work. Got it all out of there. It was one of the most miserable jobs I ever did. But I only cut it to 6 inches. Started growing back so fast you couldn't believe it. City started getting on my case. So I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to go spray it. So I asked the woman that worked for me who mowed the grass in the off-campus lots to go take our worst mower and go mow the blackberry just to give me time to figure out what to do. She mowed it. I didn't do a thing. So 2 weeks later, because she mowed every 2 weeks, she went back, mowed it again. By the end of summer, no more blackberry. That mowing it every other week killed all the blackberry. It's a woody plant. It couldn't make enough strength. And she kept mowing it lower and lower. It got replaced by this grass and weed type lawn that stayed green, way better than the campus lawns that we were watering.
Oh wow.
And so if you ever have to get rid of blackberry, if you mow it every other week, it just does it in. And at Seattle U, we built this new athletic field, and most of the time I designed the landscapes, but if it was a huge project, they'd have a landscape architect design it, and I'd write the specs of what I wanted and didn't want. They put ivy in all these beds around this athletic field, which is so invasive and horrible. So I started thinking, I wonder what would happen if we mowed that every other week, got rid of the ivy, just like that. We only had to dig it out where the mower couldn't go. Same with a blackberry. So if you ever got to get rid of something, a woody weed, that's a great way to do it. Found out totally by accident, but I took credit for the whole thing.
Yeah. So it's the ivy was similar. The blackberry is just not able to form that wood.
Yep, just couldn't make enough food. It got replaced by this kind of natural lawn, which we took out and put in a ground cover, but it worked.
Yeah. And in the sense, if you can't mow it, probably just the idea of just cutting back, making sure you're cutting it back to ground level.
Yeah,
Is
you'd
that
have
would
to
that be
do
the
it a
same?
lot. It would be tough, but
Yeah, yeah.
it might work. But boy, you'd be doing it a lot. Where the mower is so easy and quick, just
Yeah. Well, I just say I've got this space that there's no real place to put a mower in there to get to it, but we keep getting blackberries that are popping up. So I'm just wondering if maybe I'm
I
get
think
down
if
there with
you
the
keep cutting them
pruners or something.
every time,
Yeah.
I think you're right. I think it would. I never tried that, but I
Just
think
got
it
to
would.
stay on top of it, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Exactly. Let's see here. I did ask one of my groups let's see if they had any questions for you here. Let's see here. We've got Krista Gilbert asked, "What's the best advice that you have received?" Tough
Well,
question here.
I think one that I think was really great advice came from Seattle University. So Seattle University, when it was early on in its landscaping, was done by a combination of an old priest and Fujitaro Kubota. And the Kubota Garden's real famous in Seattle, and Kubota did a lot of great landscaping. And when he came to the United States from Japan, he actually went around to some of the most famous pines in Japan and took seeds off those, brought those seeds in 1906 to the United States. Most of the pines at Seattle U were from the seeds in his pocket he brought in 1906. So they were really beautiful. So even though I had been a professional pruner and I had pruned Asian type plants and things, I really wanted to know how to do it right. So Fujitaro had died by the time I was at Seattle U, but his son, Tommy Kubota, who was in his 80s, was still around and a really neat guy that I became friends with.
Yeah.
So I'd invite him to Seattle U and I'd pay him for a consultation to help me learn to really prune pines really well. And his best advice to me, he had two advices. He said, you got to be super patient if you're doing, an Asian style pine that you want almost to look like a bonsai out in your garden. He said, you have to be super patient. You can't expect to make a tree look like you've been pruning it for 20 years in 1 year.
Yeah.
And his main advice to me was no triple espressos at Starbucks before I prune that day.
Just hold back a little bit, right? Just hold
Yeah,
back
you
a little bit.
gotta calming me down is not easy.
Like them triple espressos, huh?
Yeah, that gets you going. You could do some pretty fast pruning after one of those.
Definitely being from Seattle too, right?
Oh yeah,
Gotta
you're
love
not
your
kidding.
coffee.
Oh, there's one on every corner, I swear.
Not hard to find. All right, let's see here. I got another question from Jesse Robbins. Asks, any thoughts on how you've seen climate change alter the various flora and fauna in the area? So have you noticed yourself, differences in how you're gardening, over the years based on climate change?
Well, I've noticed two things because the climate is so erratic. Like you said, how it was in the hundreds. We got that heat dome, and we hit 111 degrees at my house. And that was so bizarre for Seattle, just unbelievable. And so what I've seen is it's two things. As a general rule, I could grow things that weren't hardy that are starting to survive in Seattle. So crinodendron is a super rare plant with these great red lanterns that comes from Chile. And I started being able to grow that out there. And there were salvias that normally, Amistad, for instance, normally died every winter that started surviving more. So as we slowly warmed up, I think Seattle really kind of went from zone 7 towards zone 8 quite a bit. So in a
Yeah.
way, I could grow more things. At the same time, this erratic temperature changes and everything we're having is killing plants. So the last 2 winters, and I'll bet it's been the same for you, have been so cold. And so all the salvias in my garden didn't come back. I couldn't believe it. They've always come back, except for Salvia hot lips, because that guy's a tiger. But most of them didn't come back. And my hardy fuchsias made it, but they barely made it. So I'm seeing it's going both ways. It's making it so you can grow things you didn't used to be able to grow, and then it's murdering them after
Yeah.
a couple of years when we get erratic weather. So
Yeah, definitely. And that's similar for me. What I've seen down here in Southern Oregon as well over my time gardening is all of these different kind of, we just got to be a little bit more prepared for earlier summers, and making sure that we're, keeping our plants protected and shaded a little bit more is kind of some of the strategies, again, going back to those tomatoes that we talked about earlier,
yep.
is just, trying to utilize some of these, maybe some shade cloth or some things like that to hopefully help out with too much intense direct sun. But you can't really get past the overall heat, and like you said, we had a couple of days of nearly 115 degrees in a row
Ooh.
for us down here, and
Oh,
not much
geez.
and not much cooler, on either end of those as well too. So, that intense heat can really be something for the garden. Just got to make sure you're, trying to keep your plants taken care of the best you can throughout that time, making sure they don't dry out is the biggest thing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Watering in the morning. If you know the heat dome's coming, water in the morning. And, there's usually you got leeway. You put a hydrangea in too much sun, usually you can get away with it. But with this erratic temperatures, if you got a hydrangea out there in full sun or a rhododendron, it's going to cook. You're going to pay the
Yeah.
price for that. So follow the Tag's advice more than you used to.
Yeah, definitely. Yes. Yeah. Definitely if you're looking to try to, hold back from some of the detrimental things that can happen through that and see just a little bit more success out of what you're putting into your garden, you want to be aware of, some strategies to help out with those hottest parts of the year. And let's see here. I had one other question from, oh, yes, this question is from Karen Hoog, who actually I had on our program several weeks back. She's an author of a book called Leave Your Troubles Behind, where she talks about all sorts of different strategies and ways to utilize growing gardens and growing things in order to alleviate stress in your day-to-day life. It's just a really great book I recommend for everybody. But
I think I met her. And
yeah,
but if I saw her, I'd know for sure.
yeah,
So
definitely. Yeah, she was really great. We had a really great conversation about all those sort of things. I think that gardening and de-stressing is one of the biggest benefits that I get out of the garden too. I always find myself so much happier leaving and finishing my gardening chores than I was when I started. So it is a big
I'm
thing.
same here. That's the nicest feeling, being out there working in the garden. Just it's a little hard to get up these days after you've been on your hands and knees for too long. But yeah, no, I
Yeah,
agree. I agree.
yeah,
And
yeah,
Karen, thanks for asking. Well,
yeah. She
I've
says
got
Cisco is the sweetest, and are you working on a
uh,
new book?
well, uh, I kind of started a hummingbird book, so that might be my next book, and that'll be
Oh,
a lot of fun. And my publisher would love it if I'd write that. But
yeah.
what I want to write is short stories from my life, but not garden short stories, just short
Oh,
stories. So
okay.
during the pandemic, I started writing them. I've got a bunch of them. I got to edit to live and tweet a lot of them, but my publisher just went, no way. We're not going to do it. You could get someone else to do it. But they said people like your books because they're garden books. So yeah, I gotta. Hopefully, it's for me. Writing a book is really difficult. Not because I'm not okay at writing it, because I wrote for 17 years for the PI and the Times, and
Yeah.
and I still write for the Bellevue Botanical Garden and some other groups. But the problem for me when I write a book is you got to stick your hinder in the chair and leave it there. And I want to get out to the garden, and I
Yeah.
walk 8 to 12 miles a day. So,
Oh yeah.
to get time to write a book and do all the other things, take care of this, quite complicated and tremendously fun garden I have. It's hard to take the time to write a book. So I think I'd like to write another one, but maybe this next winter I'll really get to work. And if they really want me to do hummingbirds, I'll probably do hummingbirds, which will be a lot of fun. So it'll
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
fun to write.
What's some of your favorite? Do you have a favorite hummingbird?
Oh yeah. Well, I've got a bunch of them hanging around here. I got this
Yeah.
rufus in our garden right now. It chases me out of the garden.
Right.
It goes to this old man fountain I have out there, and
Yeah.
it's a really cool old fountain that's got a old man's face. It's huge, and it
Right.
spits water 3.5 feet down to a basin below.
Yeah.
And all the birds come and take baths in his mouth where the water comes out and everything. It's really fun to watch. But there's actually 2 rufous hummingbirds come. They drink the water right where it comes out of his mouth and then
Oh yeah.
ride it all the way down to the basin drinking the
Don't you-
water.
Really?
It's so funny, but don't laugh at a hummingbird, whatever you do. I was back there with a friend and we were watching him drink the water. We were
Yeah.
walking out the narrow trail. That little rufous hummingbird hit me right in the ear. Then
Oh
it
my
sat
God.
in front of me going, beep, 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 beep. I'm like, all right, I won't laugh. So don't laugh at a hummingbird, whatever you do.
Yeah. 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 For sure. Right. There's so.
For
Oh man,
sure.
I'm telling you, there's few things that are so intimidating than something so small that can literally hover in front of your face with that pointy beak, like it could just stick you at any moment.
Well, yeah, mine, that rufus is saying, turn that fountain on. I turn it off at night because the raccoons get in it sometimes, which drives
Yeah.
me nuts. And so sometimes I'm a little late getting out there to turn it on. The hummingbirds are hanging around going, turn that on now. They're just hovering around me. They want
Yeah.
that water.
I remember one time I was hiking with a few friends. We were out on a trail, and all 3 of us instinctually just kind of ducked and got down as we heard this noise that you just wouldn't believe. It sounded like something was flying. I mean, and it ended up being just this little hummingbird, but it was cruising right past us and just made the loudest sound with those wings and the way they fluttered. And I mean, we were like, what in the world is that? We couldn't tell. And then all of a sudden, this little hummingbird flies right by us.
Oh, that's so funny. Probably all looked at each other like, oh, geez.
Yeah, I could not believe. And again, it was out there. It was probably echoing off of some things, so there's probably some echo going on, but it was so loud. And I couldn't believe it, So
I believe it.
And it sounded like it was coming right for our heads too. So we were
It probably was too,
we all ducked too. Yeah. And then this hummingbird just cruises by, and we all just kind of felt so silly and laughed about it, the whole thing, because we thought something was really about to take our head off.
We're so lucky because hummingbirds only live in North and South America, no other continent on Earth. And
wow.
They live in, some of the islands, but
Yeah.
No other continent on Earth has hummingbirds. And, I lead garden tours around the world and have friends all over the world. They are so jealous of our hummingbirds. They are so cool and fun to watch. It's just cool. Amazing.
Just the way they maneuver around is just so, yeah, these little tiny pilots just cruising around like, like you see some of those, they have those drones now that can, they got
Yeah.
these people fly these little camera drones all over, but these birds just do all that stuff themselves, and they are so
Oh, they're
fascinating.
fascinating. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. In fact, the first ones I actually, and I don't grow too many things that I think that attract them very often, but I grew this last year some pineapple sage.
Oh, they love that. Oh,
Oh my, yeah. Well, you get that, those flowers start forming on the pineapple sage. Those hummingbirds are just all over getting in there.
well, my wife and I divide the garden because she's a great gardener. And
Yeah.
every time we try to garden together, it's the neighbors see our hands and feet in the air at the same time, go, oh no, garden wars again. So we had
Yeah.
to divide the garden into his and her gardens, But
Yeah.
we're both so into hummingbirds and have so many hummingbird plants. I never feed them. They're all
Right.
fed even all winter with plants that are in
Yeah.
bloom. And we almost have to wear hard hats out there sometimes. They're just zooming around us. It's like,
Oh my.
it's almost scary. You're right.
You got any recommendations besides I mentioned pineapple sage they really like? Any other varieties of things that you can go if you want to attract some hummingbirds to your garden?
Any salvia, they just
Yeah.
love. And hot lip salvia. I actually counted how many flowers were on mine last August. 12,842.
Oh,
Oh, they're so nuts for that. They won't let me cut off branches to show in my garden talks. They just start dive bombing me, and there's so many flowers.
oh wow.
Monarda, they call that bee balm. That's so attractive to them. Just looking out the window to see. I should be think. Oh, they love that crinodendron I have.
Yeah.
So in the wintertime, because that's when people don't know what feeds them the most. So Daphne odora, they're nuts for
Okay.
that.
Yeah.
What's that? The paper yen plant. I just can't think of the botanical name right now, but that one, it's got those yellow flowers, fragrant. It's in the Daphne family. It'll come
Yeah.
Chrysantha. No, that's the second name. Anyway, it'll come to Edgeworthia. There we go.
Edgeworthia.
Edgeworthia is a big one. I sit in my car when I'm on my way to do something and I have to write my mileage a lot. I just
Yeah.
sit and watch the hummingbirds. And it's the middle of winter, snow on the ground. And Sarcococa, sweet
Yeah.
box, they're nuts for that stuff,
Oh wow.
And if you can get Grevillea, so Grevillea victoriae is this plant gets 6 feet tall. It's got sparkling red flowers all winter long,
Oh
and
yes.
they are all over that. And then all of the Oregon grapes from Asia, so they're Mahonia media. Now I think they're calling them barberries now, berberis. But these plants are so attractive to hummingbirds, and they bloom all winter long with big yellow candelabra flowers. It's just
Oh wow.
really fantastic plants that
Sound-
bloom and keep the hummingbirds in your garden all winter long. Now, the rufous fly back to Mexico, but the annas stay here year round. This only started in the 1970s. They're
Oh
up here
really?
all winter, and I have 3 that never leave my garden. They're here
Oh
year
wow.
round. So fun, yeah. Even in winter, I get buzzed.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They stick around long enough. They got names.
Oh yeah. Well, there's Nicholas, Nellie, and there's Heather.
Heather even. Yes.
Oh yeah. And the coolest thing is when you see the Anna's hummingbirds. They're the big green ones, and their whole head is bright red, and their gorget's bright red right now. They're scary when they come up in front of you, and they're pretty big. And they do their the love dance. So what they do, it's 2 females will be 4 foot apart, flapping their little wings about 80 times per second to stand still in the air. Then a male Anna, and in my case, that's Nicholas most of the time. He comes up between them, gives them both the eye, then takes off from a dead stop in the air, shoots straight up as an arrow, about 120 feet high,
Oh, wow.
beats his little wings 160 times per second, hits speeds over 60 miles an hour, then locks his wings in, goes into a death-defying dive, just is about to splat like a ripe tomato on the patio. He goes and misses the cement by 1/8 inch. What us guys have to do for love. Oh la la. So yeah, that's their mating dance. It's cool to see.
Oh wow. Birds have some of the most amazing things they do when it comes to mating and all of that, but that's pretty exceptional.
That's pretty cool. I see it all the time over here too, so it's fun.
Risk breaking your neck over 1/8 of an inch.
Well, I've met a few women I might do that for. I don't know.
There you go. That's so awesome. That's awesome. One last thing I wanted to ask you about, Ciscoe, is one of the things it mentions in your bio there is that you love to travel and you do some garden tours around in different countries. Could you talk about some of the different places you've gone and some of the different tours that you do?
Oh man, well, I've led 24 international garden tours now. I've worked with different people, but I've been working with one guy for a long time because he sets up the hotels and does all that. We work together to find the good gardens and figure out where we're going to go. And so just this last summer, because of the pandemic, I had all these garden tours planned and they all got postponed. So this last summer I did Scotland, which was so fun.
Yeah.
Oh, and it never rained. It's supposed to rain every day in Scotland.
How lucky for you.
Oh, they had this heat thing, and the gardeners were complaining they don't even have watering systems in some of their gardens. They get so much rain. And so they were complaining, but the gardens look great because they were killing themselves hand watering. No midges. So midges in Scotland are famous. They bite the livid Tweedle out of it. We only had midges one day. And it was enough to let me know how lucky we were. But so Scotland was wonderful. And then we did Belgium and the Netherlands. And we went there. It's called Floriade. And every 10 years, they have this gigantic garden celebration in the Netherlands. And so we went there, and that was something to see. It's just acres of all kinds. You see the newest houseplants that you're not going to see in the States for another 5 years, probably, and all kinds of new introductions and new ideas about gardening, and not enough shopping. That was the only problem. They need more shopping because I love garden art. I'm always looking for it. But so that was really cool. So I did Belgium, the Netherlands, and then not too long ago, I was in South Africa leading a garden tour. That's the second one I've led there. And South Africa, the gardens there are to die for. They are so good. I remember one woman, it was kind of near Johannesburg. It was in Pretoria. And she warned us, we're going through her garden with her. It's a private garden. And she goes, oh, I do have to warn you, there's a cobra in the garden.
A cobra?
I go, a cobra in the garden? She goes, yeah, I let it live there. And I go, why do you do that? She goes, because the bad people all around know that cobra is in this garden. There's no way they're going to try and break into my house and come through this garden. But some of the people on the tour are like, I don't want to go to this garden.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I just told them, hey, I said, if this woman's leading us, she knows where the Cobra is. Don't worry, we could go see it. That was spectacular. So,
Oh my.
but England, anybody who's never gone garden touring in England, you got to go southern England and Cornwall.
Yeah.
Cornwall is amazing because they have a tropical climate. You see puyas and all these tropical plants, palms that there's no way we could ever grow here, you know.
Yeah.
So England's really fun. You go to, you know, some of those famous gardens like anyway, my brain's wearing out. But I love that. I'm leading one to Costa Rica this winter. I've already led one there. Australia and New Zealand are just a die for.
Yeah.
Oh God, they're so fun. Tasmania is just, I did a 25-mile hike with my wife in Tasmania.
Mm-hmm.
She talked me into it. Hilly, just hilly as could be. And we're at the end of 25 miles of hiking. It's about 100 degrees out. And there's 3 trails. And my wife, Mary, suddenly can't remember which trail goes back to our rental car. I'm like, divorce! If the car's not up there, we're getting divorced. It's the first time I ever kissed a car. So she picked the right trail. We're still married.
That's great. Oh yeah, I would love to be able to go to Australia or even New Zealand and see the things that they got there. I just actually did an interview with a gentleman who has a YouTube gardening channel out of Australia, and it was really kind of fun to be able to talk about the different things that they're able to do. I mean, their climate differences are so, you know, and plus completely opposite too. They got to go north to get to the cold.
Yeah. And
or north to get to the warm, and then it's or it's the opposite anyways of what we've got. And it's interesting to think about the different things that they get to grow there.
Yeah, I like going to private gardens a lot. I love the big public, like Sissinghurst and Great Dixter in England are so terrific, you know. And if you on my tours, I always try and get the head gardener or the owner of the garden to lead us on a tour. And I try and limit so there's not so many people so everybody can hear and everything. But private gardens are so fun. And I'll leave you with one last story because I've been on here forever. You're probably trying to get me out of here. But
no, that's all right. Not at all.
But so we are in England, and I never eat lunch. So at lunchtime, my wife Mary and I always hike around or go visit the town while everybody goes and eats somewhere. And most of the time, I let them find their own restaurants for lunch. We eat together at dinner a lot and stuff. So I'm meeting everybody at the restaurant they all ate at, and a woman comes up to me and says, "I hear you're leading a garden tour here." I go, "Yeah." She goes, "You want to see my garden?" And whenever something like this happens, I go, "Yeah," you know, because it's going to be fun. So I said, "Sure." So she goes, "Well, there's one condition." I go, "Yeah." And she whispers in my ear, "No one can look at my smalls." And I go, "Your smalls?" She goes, "My, what do you call them? My underwear hanging on the line."
Oh.
So I turned to everybody and I go, "We could go in and see her garden, but you can't look at her skivvies that are hanging on the line." Well, you know what? There's only one thing everybody on that tour remembers from that garden: her skivvies. When someone tells you can't do it, you can't resist.
Exactly.
Oh, but she was hilarious. She gave us the funnest tour on the whole
you're
trip.
Up somewhere high. You're gonna look down.
So there's always so many funny things that happen on these trips that you don't expect, and that's what makes them the most fun, you know. And the nice thing, you know, because I travel a lot when I'm not leading tours too. Mary and I were going to Cornwall in September, and we go all over the world. We go to France every spring and go to these big lemon festivals and everything. So So we're really avid travelers. We've been practically everywhere on Earth. And, what was I going to say about that? But one of the things is that as you do these trips, when you do the tours, you become so close friends with the other people on the tours.
Yeah.
So Mary and I we go hang around. We walk our dogs with a woman from Whidbey I met when she went on one of our trips. We go out to dinner with a lot of people that have traveled with us. And so it's just everybody gets really close because you're really experiencing fun things together. So it's nice.
Getting to really share a unique life experience in that situation. And I think you might be on a really great idea for what you could do for an upcoming book your publisher might agree on, is talking about some of them stories from some of those garden tours in these other countries, maybe a little travel book or something.
Well, my last book, Oh La La, it's all short stories about gardening. There are some stories from some of my trips in there,
From your
and
travels as well.
one of them is kind of wild, but it's really a fun story.
Yes. Awesome.
They changed we went to the French garden tour, or it's the French garden show. It's in Chamonix, France, and the gardeners do these gardens that are out all summer. And they work with artists that put in artwork in it, and the accommodation is to die for. It's really fun. So anybody, if you can ever go to Chamonix, France, or go to the garden show, you will. I guarantee you'll love it. It's a little hard to understand the French artistry, but they tell you they give you a description because it can be really wild, out of the way. We went one year and it was color in the garden. Next year I bring my whole group. We walk in and it was eroticism in the garden.
Oh, wow.
First thing we saw were the biggest two boobs I've ever seen in my whole life. They were like 20 feet high. I saw that and I went, oh, something odd is going on here.
Ooh la la, for sure, right?
Oh la la. But we all ended up having so much fun. It was the funniest thing that happened on the whole trip. It was wild.
It was wild.
The French, they're not
They're a
shy.
little more they're a little more open over there, aren't they?
Oh yeah.
That is so awesome, and really, really awesome of you, Ciscoe, to join with us here on the Let's Get Growing show and share some of these stories, talk about gardening and your career and all of that. Just a really, really awesome inspiration for me and many other gardeners out there. And if you're watching the show and you haven't met or seen Ciscoe and any of his garden talks or anything like that, I'm sure there's some things you can find on YouTube. You can go find different things that he's got as far as appearances at his website at ciscoe.com. Be sure to also check out his books. We've got the Ask Ciscoe book here that I've got that's been out for a while, plus the newer book, Ooh La La, sharing some of those garden stories that he talked about. So be sure to go get one of those books, and maybe hopefully down the road we'll get Ciscoe back on the show and we'll talk some more gardening.
Well, this has been a total blast for me. I've really enjoyed being on, and you got a really great show.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate it. Yeah, we're just getting started. We just started up this season. It's something I've been thinking about for a while now. And I'll just share is that a couple of years ago, I think it was after I talked to you at one of the Northwest Flower and Garden shows. It was kind of one of those things that I thought of as I was doing some live streaming on YouTube. Was like, I need to have a really good garden talk show where I can sit down and talk to people like Ciscoe. And you were one of those people who was at the top of my list of who I wanted to have on my show when I got everything started. So really, really happy that you agreed to come on. And when I got that email from you a few weeks back, I was just like, oh my God, yes. Just made my day. And today, you showing up on our show has really made today for me as well too. So thanks again, Ciscoe, for coming on here and sharing all of your joy of gardening with us.
Well, thank you so much. And everyone out there, keep gardening, because there's nothing more fun in the world than gardening. So just
That's
keep
right.
at it. And always remember, the last little bit of advice I'll give is that the person who murders the most plants is the true plant expert, because you
That's right.
learn every time something goes wrong. So don't let it bother you. Just learn from it and be
That's right.
excited, because you got a spot for a new plant.
That's right. If you're not learning, you're not gardening, as I say. And most of us gardeners who've been around doing it have killed probably a lot more plants than we've actually succeeded at. But
Oh yeah.
that's how we learn, huh?
Yep.
All right, Ciscoe, I'm going to go ahead and end this show out. And I don't know if you want to stick around for a minute after the show there, but I'll see you here really shortly.
Okay.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Bye-bye. Awesome. How great is that for Ciscoe to join with us here on our Let's Get Growing show? I've been a big fan of his, like I've said, for many, many years, and he's just such a joy to get to talk to and to kind of get some garden advice from too. I really loved listening to his radio show for many years. It was just you get to hear him talk about all these different plants and how they grow, and just the vast amount of knowledge that he's gained over the years is just really, really exceptional. And we are really, really privileged to be able to have him here with us on the Let's Get Growing show. So again, thanks to Ciscoe for joining with us, and also check the links down below so that you can find him and his books, and go check out some more of Ciscoe. And hopefully again down the road we'll get to see him here on the show again later as well too. And also I want to say to everybody that a good way to support our show is to support our sponsor, Ivy Organic, and you can check them out at ivyorganic.com, where you can get lots of different great products that they have. The 3-in-1 plant guard, their fertilizer, really great organic 6 macros plus fertilizer I really recommend for the garden as well too. And be sure to use our promo code GROW10, GROW 10, to get 10% off of the different things that you can buy there. And also be sure to go check out our website at letsgetgrowing.live to see about all of the upcoming shows and all of our past shows as well. Keep up with everything that we've got growing on here with the Let's Get Growing show. And be sure to give this video and this interview with Ciscoe a big thumbs up. Hit the like button down below, as well as the subscribe button to follow along with all of our garden adventures here on the Urban Gardener channel. And also be sure to share with your garden friends and your garden groups. And we'll see all of you here on our next week's show. Thanks for joining us.